Al played well throughout the entire series, caused a lot of problems, whether it was driving to the basket, mid-range shots, post moves, getting to his, whether it was his jump hook or getting to his spots on the floor. At the top of the key a couple of times, driving it, not just tonight, but just knowing how to play. He's a veteran that's been around, been through a lot of battles, been through Game 7s before, so he deserves credit for, the way he played, but just the knowledge of playing and understanding what playoff games, playoff series are like and how you have to battle.
How about veteran presence? Do you think that's a difference maker? It always is in the postseason, and normally it's because you're getting calls as well, and the young players don't really benefit from that. But I felt like Giannis got away with a lot of stuff. You know how I feel about the officiating. That's not the difference. It's just veteran muster. I mean, even somebody who's really not that old, right? But you look at Morris, that man has a veteran swagger to him out on the floor, and I know we don't necessarily know who the leaders in the locker room are, but something tells me that Marcus Smart and Marcus Morris are two emotional leaders in the locker room. And certainly this series and the Celtics got a lift from Marcus Smart coming back and just in time because, like you saw the other night, Jaylen Brown goes down. So they definitely needed that extra player out there, and especially one that was going to attack, even if it wasn't so much generating offense or raining threes, but just putting the pressure on the opponent. That was all there. So that's where I know there's a very young squad, but you just gave props to Al Horford, and that's kind of where I'm going with it. Even Baines had a really nice Game 7 for him as well. And I think that veteran presence on that roster, and we can tie this into a Philly discussion shortly, but that veteran presence in the locker room and on the floor really made a difference for the Celtics. And coaching is a factor, but I think that's the other one.
Well, I think, and they go hand in hand in part, right? But Brad talked about in the post game. He was saying, Baines and Horford have been our rocks since the beginning. I said something to the effect of, I can't think of anyone who could do more for this team than Baines and Horford have. And I think, that speaks to that. That was part of my I guess, frustration with Mook Morris to this point. I really thought in those second units that Morris was going to be able to use that wily veteran. I was saying this. I mean, this is not a guy in his 30s. He's mid-20s guy,
That's what I mean. To call him a veteran, it's only because of how young his team is, but he would still be considered a young player on any other team as well.
Totally. And I thought here in the fourth quarter, in that run that I talked about, the start of the fourth, you could see that there was like, look, we know what we need to do here. We know how we need to get buckets. There were times, and I think in this series, particularly in Game 6, Brad had to call a timeout, and then they'd play well for a few minutes, and then it'd kind of fall apart, especially when Al Horford was off the floor. You didn't see that in Game 7. And I think you're right. That's experience gets that. It's veteran savvy. You need that on the court. You can't call everything from the sidelines. And those guys like Morris, the guys like Smart, that was the difference, I think, in being able to play smart in those situations. Parker just didn't have that intellect to stay on the court. Brogdon. I mean, you saw Jason Terry out there a lot in that 7th game. And I thought that spoke to just your point, which is, hey, the Celtics seem to have these guys that know what they need to do out there in a Game 7. We don't. Let's throw out an 85-year-old point guard who can shoot a little bit and can't do much else, and hope that's going to carry down to the rest of this team. It didn't.
So, John, we talk about that veteran presence, and I want to segue. Obviously, that series is over. We've wrapped it. We spent the first 10 minutes of the show on it. On to Philly, which is in my backyard. So I've got neighbors that want to have this Philly-Boston rivalry going. I got a text message first thing Sunday morning. It's on. So it's going to be a wild ride. But we've been looking at the 76ers for a couple of years and saying, look, these are going to be the two younger teams with high draft picks. We've kind of predicted it. I feel like the 76ers got ahead of schedule this season from what I thought. I figured maybe one more year, especially when Fultz got injured. He's kind of been a non-factor this entire season and definitely in the postseason. And who knows, he might get some garbage time minutes here and there. They had a very easy, I will say, as compared to the rest of their Eastern Conference playoff hopefuls, they've had a fairly easy go of it in the first round. So they've been resting up. And that veteran presence for them primarily has come from JJ Redick, which I knew he would bring a lot to the table. But I feel like he's probably the glue that team really needed to vault themselves up. And mostly the final 2/3 of the season is when they really got it going after they developed some chemistry.
Yeah, and you go back and look at I was just looking at their game, kind of their game log, and the last 5 teams that they've lost to were playoff teams. And you have to go back to get that 5th loss. You'd have to go back to February 25th. So they've
been on a run.
They've been on a run, yeah. But as you said, I mean, there's a lot of Orlando's, Memphis's, Brooklyn's in that run between early March, I suppose, and the start of the playoffs. So you got that. You also got them having played a Miami Heat team, which arguably was the weakest of the bunch, maybe the best defensive group of the bunch, but lacking. They were the team that most playoff
that's who we wanted
to face.
Yeah, that's who we said we wanted. So there you go.
So here we are, right? We're here with Philly. You're behind enemy lines, and this is
bunkered down. It's like being the minute you get out of New England, it's brutal. I'm a Pats fan. I can't even tell anybody anymore.
I know,
and pretty soon it'll be the same way with the Celtics. In the past, everybody's been like, "Oh yeah," but it's been pretty safe since I moved from Maine, for the most part. And then now it's getting unsafe again.
Well, between the Eagles and the Super Bowl, and now Sixers, Philly's they're feeling themselves right now. So
that Super Bowl did temper things, though, on this Celtics front. I am going to tell you, it kind of appeased the fan base. They're still in the afterglow. So this whole rivalry, while it's there, it's nothing like what it was like before the Super Bowl right now.
Well, I think just hang on, my friend, because I think you're going to be in for a wild 2 weeks of hate, discontent, and anger coming from.
Just don't treat me like a Vikings fan. That's all I'm going to say. Don't treat me like a Vikings fan,
dude. I think it's going to be worse. I am girding for battle at this point. I think it's going to be really ugly. I look. There is nothing worse than a Philly fan who feels full of themselves going up against a Boston fan who is full of themselves and has seemingly no expectations given the injuries, the hospital Celtics, as we're now calling them. This is only the only thing that can be shed is blood all over the Twitter screen.